Hey everybody, Carl here from CKMP. Just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about some suspension stuff. We're going to change from Fox coilovers to a set of air shocks for this season. Something that I'm super excited about, and I want to show you why. Let's have a look. So the cool thing about the air shocks is the capacity. And I know that's something we talked about before, but it sure makes a difference if you're going to pound through big bumps or ride super aggressive. It's the capacity that these things have to absorb bumps. And I mean, not everybody beats their sled like it's a snowcross sled, but these really do have the capacity for that. So what we're going to do today is just kind of show you what the air pressure should be set at and how to set them. So make sure, you know, you can put them in the vise. I'm using some soft jaws on here, and they're really pretty easy to set. It tells you right on here that important, adjust the pressure in the Evol chamber before the main chamber, and they're even numbered. So when you get these, you can, like I say, we're just going to do a bench test right now, but you install them in the sled, and then really the most important thing is checking the air pressure in the ambient temperature that you ride. So elevation does play a small role for sure, but there's such a small volume in here, it doesn't make or break the shock's performance. So I'm 180 pounds, you know, and then with a gear on, I'm 215, you know, maybe even 220. So if it's big bumps, square edged, or really nasty where we're gonna ride, I'll run 150 pounds in the Evol chamber and 65 to 70 in the main chamber. But if it's a pretty smooth trail or deep powder, and it's really smooth, I'll run lower the Evol to 135. I don't go below that, but somewhere in that range, 135 to 150. And when you hear, so when you adjust for that, so we're gonna pump it up, I'll put 150 in there. So we're at, and you can bleed a little bit off if you go over here, small increments. We're at 150 PSI. When I let this out or unscrew this, it's the air escaping from the gauge to the Schrader valve. So don't worry, it's not coming from the Evol chamber. It's designed, so when you thread it off, it's hooked up now, but first of all, it'll unhook the Schrader. So now the Evol chamber is sealed, and what you hear is the pressure escaping from the gauge through the hose down to the Schrader valve. And when you hook it up, it will read slightly lower because there's 150 PSI in there. When you screw this in, it pushes the Schrader valve and it loses that pressure into the gauge. So it's a very small amount. So don't worry, if it's 150 when you put on the gauge, when you unhook it, it's 150 PSI in there. So once you have that set, then you always set the Evol chamber first, and then you set the main chamber. So anywhere is in between 65 and 70 PSI in the main chamber. That's what I run pretty much regardless of the 135 to 150 pound pressure in the Evol. That's really good for, you know, riding really aggressive and even moderately. But I would say it's important to unhook the sway bar for me in the Alpine with the float shocks, whereas with the coilover shock, you want to keep the sway bar hooked up. They just don't have the capacity like the air shocks. Even on the trail, if it's a fairly smooth trail, I will leave the sway bar unhooked on the air shocks, you know, in the Alpine or on the smooth trail. If it's a really rough trail and you're going to be carrying fast speed, you know, through big bumps, then hooking the sway bar up through that stuff does help for sure. And that just goes to show you the capacity that these things have. You know, it just keeps the front nice and high. It still is nice and supple like a coilover in the first part of the travel, but because of the design of the Evol chamber, as this is going down, you have 65 pounds of pressure in here, and as you're going down and that pressure is coming up, it matches the Evol chamber, and then that's what gives it a nice smooth transition in your spring rate. And then the further it goes down in the stroke, once the Evol chamber or the Evol piston bottoms out, now the spring rate starts to go up again. And that's really in the very bottom of the stroke, so that's what gives it the Evols such great bottoming resistance. And there's no other shock on the market that has those features or that kind of capacity. That's why we choose these things, is because they're light, they're full of technology, and they work super awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed this segment. Don't forget, when you're checking the pressures in these things, you always want to dump the main chamber, take the air out, put your air in first in the Evol chamber, then in the main chamber, and don't be scared to play with the clickers. You know, and when it's time to check the pressures in these is when you have a big swing in ambient temperature. So learn about them, don't be scared to play with them, go out, ride them, and enjoy them. See you guys later.